This is Paul.
Yes.
I was just sitting here reading a magazine, and I found out that there was some interests that are at odds.
Yeah.
Those interests are sometimes at odds, and have been the subject of decades of litigation. Now, I know that, well, quite possibly, I have interests
Yes.
that are at odds with those that don't want to enforce the laws. Could be decades of litigation about that whole issue of being in law enforcement,
Yes.
and then knowing of crime and refusing to enforce the laws that would prosecute an individual for the crime that they have committed.
True.
Now, it seems to be some sort of flood in the Midwest. I was reading this article on MSN, and it said that breaches everywhere.
Yeah.
Midwest levees burst and tough questions follow. Now, you know, I don't want Mark Zuckerberg to think that I dislike him. I mean, suing his corporation for X number of billions of dollars.
Yes.
He would probably point to LinkedIn, Twitter,
Yes.
something else, WhatsApp, and then email.
hmm hmm
Now, there's this big question of liability that could take decades to decide. And when I'm sitting here wanting my civil rights enforced, I'm sure corporate attorneys are more than happy to spend decades paying for the legal representation of lawsuits.
Yes. hmm
See, they seem to be spending this corporate money as if it had no value. When you go through the Facebook and you get the actual websites that are connected to Facebook,
Yes.
similar to what I described to you this morning,
Yes.
why don't you get me the other corporations that are also connected to the websites that are on Facebook?
Yes.
That would be LinkedIn, Twitter, WhatsApp, and then the emails that you could email the information to the individual.
Yes.
Because a lot of these corporations, they don't have a problem building their actual corporate identity on well, because of the expense of other companies. But as I'm reading here in Corning, Missouri,
Yes. hmm
floodwaters overpower levees and swallow your fields.
Yes.
Now, this would upset me if I were a farmer. See, it says here that the residents had finally paid off the debts to past repairs,
Yes.
but the water ripped through at record levels, blasting new openings in the levees that are supposed to protect homes and farms.
Yes.
Now, my thought is there's a couple different ways to fix this levee system.
hmm
Well, they call it a levee system. Could you get me the Army Corps of Engineers and the actual employees of that Army Corps
Yes.
for approximately the last 60 years that said, well, it's going to cost us $80 billion to fix the levee system?
Oh.
See, the recent flooding, which has devastated farms,
Yes.
roads, and Native American reservations,
Yes.
has pushed to the foreground a debate that has raged quietly for generations. Now, these Native American reservations, I talked to you about having ownership of them. I know you're just sitting there, but the American Society of Civil Engineers
Yes.
gave the country's levee system a D grade in 2017.
Yeah.
Now, this $80 billion in investment
hmm
over 10 years. You know, I could probably make some improvements in the levees using, let's say, a foot thick,
Yes.
high density recycled garbage
Yes.
that could be used to generate electricity and refined high octane fuel. Now, this 80 billion, is there any way that we could sell the product to these Army Corps of Engineers?
Yes.
Now, let's say I had a little desalinator,
Yes.
one of these small ones.
hmm
I put it out there at various locations next to certain rivers, and I say, oh, we're having a flood. What if I turned it on and caused an immense amount of steam to take place instead of flooding? Now, these are not big desalinators. These are not like the trillion gallon desalinators. No. But it does have the effect of steam.
hmm
Now, if you did look at this last year's flooding, yes, exactly what was the order of the levees that burst during the flooding that was experienced? Yeah, because I was reading here, at least 62 levees have been breached and overtopped in the Midwest in March. Hundreds of miles of levees had sustained damage. Now, I know a lot of farmers say, well, I don't want that garbage out there. But my thought is, well, I could just put up like a wall. Yes, you just dig a trench, maybe 4 or 5 feet down. Yes. And it's just one big long wall of recycled garbage wall that keeps the levees in place. Water runs up next to it, but then there's this whole idea of steaming the water off the actual farm. Yeah. Now, in Missouri, Mr. Bullock pointed out a levee that last week had been split open and consumed by the river. Boo. It's kind of difficult to split open this high density plastic that's made from recycled garbage. Yes. You might be able to knock it over, but if you were to steam the water before it actually caused that type of pressure against the levee, it's possible that you could control a lot of these floods. Now, considering I make money, okay, on the sale of any of these innovations and it's taxpayer money, huge. Why don't you get me the members of all of the Society of Engineers? Yes. And the Corps' number one priority in its operation is life safety, said Major General Scott Spillman. The Corps' Deputy Commanding General for Civil and Emergency Management. But this being at odds with the actual needs of the individuals that you're supposed to be protecting, I think we could fix the levee system for less than $80 billion. In fact, considering the amount of electricity and high octane fuel that I could be manufacturing, yes, I think we could do it for maybe 1/20th of that cost. Now when you turn on these high temperature HHO desalinators, yes, it does take a little electricity. But I could look through the 62 levees that have burst, yes, and I could see that if I put a big one where the biggest problem is until they get smaller, 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 yeah, there's a possibility we could control the flooding. Now I just need to know the effect of the temperature of the steam. Yeah. Does that cause a dissipation of the amount of rain that would take place? Now you wouldn't think of it, right? Let's say I'm steaming at maybe 3 to 4,000 degrees. Steam's going up, it's hitting the rain clouds. Does it cause a dispersing of the clouds so that they would go someplace else?